Welcome into the Week 2 edition of the ETSN.fm podcast. I am Clint Buckley, managing editor of ETSN.fm, and I'm joined by Chandler Vessels. Chandler, you survived your first week of high school football in Texas. How was it?
I really enjoyed it. The atmosphere is a lot different than what I was used to coming from Oklahoma. There were pretty much a packed crowd, lots of excitement from fans on both sides. The teams traveled well. That's something that really impressed me was how well Tyler Lee traveled to Marshall. So it was good. It was a good experience.
All right, well, we got 1 week down, and we got about 16 more left, all the way up until really Christmas. So let's get right into it with what we learned from Week 1. You saw Lee and Marshall last week. What did you learn about both of those teams?
I'll start with Tyler Lee. I knew going in that Chance Amy was a great player. He had a lot of scholarship offers, but I was really impressed with him. He's as good as advertised. Threw for over 200 yards. I think it was like 246 yards, 2 touchdowns, and really stayed poised throughout the whole game. One thing that really impressed me about him was he got sacked a couple of times, but it could have been a lot more than that. He was really good at avoiding pressure and getting rid of the ball when he needed to. Another player on the team that impressed me was Ladarius Wickware. I didn't really know him going into the game, but he ended up with over 130 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns. And especially in the second half when Tyler Lee sort of started to take a lead, he really helped them manage the clock and sort of work the time a little bit. For Marshall, what impressed me, they have that big offensive line, but last week we were sort of talking about who are going to be some of those skill players that fill in for them behind that offensive line and get the yards. Rodarius Smith took on that role. He had about 20 carries for them. He also had over 100 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns, including a late touchdown that put them within 2 and kind of made the game exciting toward the end. They had that onside kick. Tyler Lee recovered, went on to win 29-27, but he was good. O'Darius Sellers, their quarterback, was good at times. He also displayed an ability to run, kind of maybe be a dual threat guy. So I learned a lot about those 2 teams.
The game I was at, Longview versus Lufkin, the one thing that I learned more than anything else was Longview is going to be really tough on defense. They had 8 sacks in that win against Lufkin last week, and it really kind of helped turn the tide in that game because it was tight. It was 14-7 Longview at the halftime. Lufkin got a field goal to start the third quarter, cut it to 4 points, and then Longview gets a big play and scores the touchdown on the ensuing drive, and then the defense just took over. Really started to apply pressure on Lufkin's quarterback, Kewan Thomas. Really didn't allow Lufkin to get much going the rest of the night on offense. They did score late, but the game was already out of reach. And Longview, for a defense that doesn't put a ton of emphasis on their front, they play with a what's called a 3-3-5 front. 3 linemen, 3 linebackers, 5 defensive backs. They got a lot of pressure without really having to send extra blitzers. So that was impressive to watch. Longview's pass rush kind of come together, and obviously the running game did its thing. Jesse Anderson had over 100 yards, and the quarterbacks all played well. We talked about the 3 quarterbacks last week. Starting off with Jordan Lawson, he played the first 3 series, and then Adarius Carter came in and played for most of the game, played into the fourth quarter. And then John King's son, Haynes, the sophomore, came in for the last couple of series, and his first touchdown pass, or his first pass on the varsity level, goes for a touchdown. I think 48-yarder to Camden Perry. And I asked Coach King after the game, I said, as a father, you had to feel pretty proud about that. And he said, yeah, normally it's a butt chewing that I'm giving him on the sideline, but tonight it was a high five. First high five I've ever given him on the field. So I thought that was interesting and pretty awesome. So another thing that I learned was that John Tyler is going to run the ball a lot this year. They put up over 650 yards of total offense last week in their win against Plano West, and more than 500 of that was on the ground. They have a really big offensive line anchored by Chance Billington, and they've got a running back named Cameron Grant, who's only a junior, that kind of emerged late last season as their featured back. And he had 200 yards on the ground last week. They had another couple of players step up and carry them on offense, and I think it was really important because they were transitioning to a new quarterback. Devlin Woods was taking over for Bryson Smith, who's now at the University of Houston. And Devlin Woods had a good game. I mean, he did throw one interception, but his completion percentage was good. He threw a couple of touchdown passes, and I think having a strong running game like that is only going to help a young quarterback kind of grow into that role as the season goes on. And then the last thing, you and I were both impressed by this when we got back to the office Friday night. Mm-hmm. Carthage. They could be a lot better than they were even last year, and they won a state title last year. Obviously, everyone knows about Keontae Ingram. 5 carries, over 130 yards, 2 touchdowns, and barely a half last week against Gladewater. They win 49-7. But the reason why I think they could be better this year is some of the new additions they have that weren't even members of varsity last year. Players like Kelvonte Dixon, Keontae's little brother, who plays both running back and safety on defense. And then they've got some really good defensive linemen that are sophomores, guys like Quentin Owens, Desmond Hicks, and Tykees Crawford, who are all going to be important players for them in the future for Carthage. So, Carthage, they have a tough stretch coming up. I mean, they have, we'll talk a little bit more about this later, but they have Liberty Ilo, White House, Gilmer, and then they go right into district with Henderson and Kilgore. So it's a tough stretch coming up for Carthage, but, man, they were impressive in week 1. I guess we're going to shout out our offensive and defensive players of the week from last week. The offensive player of the week was Bishop Gorman receiver Isaiah Haggerty, the Crusaders receiver, 9 catches, 284 yards, 4 touchdowns, including the game-winning 20-yard score with no time left on the clock as they beat Garrison 41-35. So congratulations to Isaiah Haggerty from Gorman. And our defensive player of the week.
Yeah, we have White Oaks defensive lineman Elijah Tress. He came up with 4 sacks and a fumble recovery and a 54-51 win. So I'm guessing he was one of the stars, like one of the only stars on that defense if they gave up 51 points. But to come up with 4 sacks and a fumble recovery is pretty impressive.
Yes, it is. So congratulations once again to our offensive and defensive players of the week, Isaiah Haggerty from Bishop Gorman and Elijah Trest from White Oak. All right, let's talk about week 2. Chandler, we got some big games on the schedule, including the 2 games that we'll be covering this week, 2 games that we're going to be excited about covering. And it all starts Thursday night, tomorrow night in Tyler. White House and Chapel Hill, 2 late Tyler rivals going head-to-head Thursday night. This game is interesting because both teams won last week, and both teams were impressive in doing so, and both teams did it in different ways. White House was very strong on defense, and we had a feeling that they were going to be really good on defense this year, just because they returned so many impact players on that side of the ball. Held Hallsville to 10 points, and then Chapel Hill put up 48 points last week and over 400 yards in their win against Wills Point. And that's impressive because Chapel Hill averaged only 16 points per game last year, and stumbling to a 2-8 season. So it'll be interesting to see how Chapel Hill moves ahead after that impressive week 1 performance and Jason Hooker's debut as their head coach. So I'm looking forward to that. I know that you have a big game coming up on Friday, Carthage against Liberty Ilo. I know you're excited about this one.
Yeah, I'm excited to see Keontae Ingram. 5 carries for 137 yards last week. I wouldn't be surprised. Liberty Ilo is, I think, a little bit better team than Gladewater. They put up 57 on Gilmer last week. Even though they lost, they gave up 58 points, so that was a shootout. But I'm excited to see how I think he'll get probably a few more carries this week. So I wouldn't be surprised if he goes over the 200-yard mark. But I'm excited to get my first taste of him. Excited to see that Liberty Ilo offense, see if they're capable of doing that again, or at least putting up a few touchdowns against this Carthage defense that allowed only 7 points last week. Liberty Ilo did a lot of their damage to the air, had 377 yards passing, 3 touchdowns. So how Carthage secondary plays against them could be a big factor in this game.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see too because in a few weeks Carthage and Gilmer play each other. And right now they're both 1 and 2 in the state poll in 4A, and Gilmer was barely able to survive against LE last week by 1 point, and we can kind of get a gauge on that game against Gilmer in a couple of weeks, just based on how Carthage and LE goes on Friday night. So I'm looking forward to that. You should have a great time over in Carthage. Some rivalry games going on this week. We got Marshall against Longview, one of the oldest rivalries in Texas. Marshall, as we mentioned, coming off a tough 2-point loss at home against Tyler Lee, looking to rebound, and Longview looks to keep on rolling after that big win against Lufkin last week. Another big rivalry game down in the south part of our region is Nacogdoches against Lufkin. These two teams have been playing for a long time. Nacogdoches coming off a disappointing season-opening loss to Kilgore, 35-21, and then Lufkin obviously is going to want to rebound from last week's loss against Longview. I know that they felt like they had their moments to come away with a win against Longview. They just didn't make enough plays, especially in the second half, to get it done. So it'll be interesting to see how the adjustments go for Lufkin from week 1 to week 2. And then the last game that I want to talk about is Texas High versus Arkansas High, and really, the game is secondary this week. Mm-hmm. As many of you know, Texas High senior defensive end Leonard Parks unfortunately passed away at the age of 17 on Saturday. Don't know many of the details. I don't think a cause of death has been determined yet, but just a really tough blow for the Texarkana community. I know he was very well liked, very popular student athlete there, and I liked him. I got to know him personally over the summer. He attended our combine. And was part of the photo days when we went up there to Texarkana back in July. So thoughts and prayers go out to the Texarkana community. I mean, I can't imagine what's going on in the minds of those kids that called him their friend and their brother on the football team. Both Texas High and Arkansas High will be wearing special decals on their helmets. With LP and the number 6, his jersey number on there in the game, and I thought that was a nice gesture for Arkansas High to pay homage to Leonard Parks this weekend. And again, thoughts, condolences, and just our prayers are with Jerry Stanford, the head coach at Texas High, and the entire Tigers football family. I know this is a difficult time for them, and the game is going to be secondary. I know Leonard would want them to take care of business against their biggest rivals, Arkansas High, and I'm sure that's going to be a focus for the kids this week is doing right by Leonard this week and playing hard, and it's going to be hard because they got the game Friday night and then they got to turn around and go to the funeral on Saturday. So thinking about the players, thinking about the coaches at Texas High, and it's just a sad deal. I mean, Leonard Parks, only 17 years old. He was committed to SMU, had a bright future ahead of him on the football field, and he'll be missed, that's for sure. Well, that's going to do it for this edition of the ETSN podcast. I want to make sure that you read our previews. We've got 3 of them up right now on our website, and then 4 more will be published on Thursday in the morning. You can also download our free mobile app. That's available at the App Store for iPhone and also Google Play for Android users. You can follow along our live scoreboard, which is brought to you this year by America's Car Mart. It'll be updated live on Friday night, so pay attention to all the games. Keep updated with how the rivals, how your favorite schools are doing. Follow along Chandler and myself this weekend on Twitter. We'll be providing live updates from the games that we're covering. Chandler, you are at Chandler Vessels.
Yes.
Very, very simple. Mm-hmm. And I'm at Clint Buckley. We don't like to have crazy, wacky Twitter handles or anything like that. So you can follow us both on Twitter that way, and then you can also follow our mothership at ETSN.fm on Twitter. So from all of us here at ETSN, we hope you have a great weekend filled with football and fun, and we will come at you again next week.